I've been fascinated by the concept of interurban railroads for many years now, and I remember being excited when I found out that one such route was coming to Train Simulator. To put it simply, interurbans were electrified railway lines that used tram-like rolling stock to connect rural communities with nearby cities and towns, complete with a bit of street running too. In this video, I'll be sharing my 2 cents on one of these interurban lines, namely the Sacramento Northern, as it appears in Train Simulator. I've had the idea to review this route for over a year now, but for various reasons, it's taken a long time to come to fruition. This add-on was released in January 2017, and as of July 2025, it's still available on Steam for a staggering 48 New Zealand dollars at full price. It is not a Dovetail Games product, having been developed by G-Tracks instead, and it stands out amongst all the modern image routes because it focuses on a classic interurban railroad, a form of railroading that has almost completely disappeared since the 1950s. Technically, the full Sacramento Northern route ran for 183 miles from Oakland to Chico, passing through Sacramento and Yuba City on the way. But what we get in Train Simulator is only the so-called South End section, from San Francisco's Trans Bay Terminal to Mallard Island. There was a rail ferry, named Ramon, that shuttled rolling stock across Suisun Bay. As for the railway's electrification system, I believe it was 1500 volts direct current, but don't quote me on that. Although it's not even close to the full Sacramento Northern line, I'm still happy with what we've got in Train Simulator, simply due to the sheer variety of scenery and potential operating practices. You start out at San Francisco's Trans Bay Terminal, before crossing over to Emeryville and Oakland on the 4-mile-long San Francisco Bay Bridge. Once you're on the eastern side of the bay, you'll run past some yards where key system rolling stock was based before reaching the street running section in Oakland. After going along 40th Street, you turn left into Shafter Avenue and run through the tiny 40th and Shafter Yard. The run up Shafter Avenue is followed by a brutal 1 in 27 climb up into the Rockford Hills, and from then on it's a mostly rural environment through Contra Costa County, broken by the towns of Walnut Creek and Concord, until you reach the junction at West Pittsburgh, where the main line swings north and runs to the ferry slips at Mallard Island. Total route length is around 45 miles, or 74.2 kilometers. The route in TS Classic is set in 1939, and the San Francisco Bay Area has changed so much since that time that I'd be here all day if I tried to explain everything that's happened. But one thing I will say is that what was once open country from Oakland up to Walnut Creek, Concord and Pittsburgh is now all built up as a large urban area. Another major change was the opening of the 5-foot 6-inch gauge Bay Area Rapid Transit network in 1972. One branch, known as the Yellow Line, goes up through Walnut Creek and other towns in former Sacramento Northern territory. The Sacramento Northern Railway has such a complex history that I can't even begin to wrap my head around it all, let alone attempt a basic overview for this video. So instead of jumping down that rabbit hole, I'll move on to discussing the rolling stock that comes with the add-on. The Western Pacific Railroad Museum, based in Portola, California, has a sub-page called Sacramento Northern Online that's all about the history of the long-dead Interurban line. I'll include a link to that website in the description. On the motive power scene, the star of the show is the Sacramento Northern's 1003 class Interurban coaches, originally built in 1912 for the Oakland, Antioch and Eastern Railway. These vehicles were short enough to traverse the numerous sharp curves on the line with ease, but could also crack along at up to 59 miles per hour on the straighter sections out in the open country. The motorcars were capable of running on their own or towing up to 2 trailers by themselves, and sometimes you would see 2 motorcars running with 3 trailers in the middle, a bit like the old Class 487 trains on the Waterloo and City line. In a way, the 1003s are a precursor to what we know today as the tram train, of which one modern example is the Class 399 in Sheffield, England. You also get the General Electric 650 class electric locomotive, otherwise known as a steeple cab due to the tall cab and sloping bonnets on each end. For some reason, this locomotive is supplied in both pre-war and post-war liveries, and while I do prefer the latter, its inclusion confuses me because it's too modern for the route's time period. The Sacramento Northern had 7 650 class locomotives on their roster, built between 1923 and 1928. They eventually became the railway's most famous and frequently photographed motive power as the years wore on, and 3 examples, namely 652, 653, and 654, have survived into preservation. The history of this class is very complicated, so I once again refer you to the Sacramento Northern Online website if you want to learn more about the steeple cabs. Despite the primitive technology available at the time, there was even a form of in-cab signalling used on the San Francisco Bay Bridge. It allowed trains to operate much closer together than conventional block signals, and there's a tutorial scenario included with the add-on to show you how the system worked. Interestingly, although the SN had been in operation since 1918, it wasn't until 1939 when they started running their passenger trains across the Bay Bridge. 2 years later, in 1941, they abandoned passenger service altogether. Besides the drivable Sacramento Northern motive power, this pack also includes 2 AI-only trains for use on the San Francisco to Oakland section. These are the Key System Bridge Units, and Interurban Electric Railway Big Red Cars. Insert reference to the Wiggles here. I know absolutely nothing about these classes' respective histories, apart from the fact that Key System service across the Bay Bridge ended in 1958, and that was the last rail service across the bridge. This pack also includes a decent selection of scenarios, although 4 of them are split into multiple parts. They cover both passenger and freight operations along this line, and, of course, you'll even see the primitive in-cab signals working as you drive the 1003 class along the San Francisco Bay Bridge. Incidentally, the steeple cab locomotives don't appear to have ever been equipped with those cab signals. I think my favourite scenario is the 4-parter called SN Tour, where you learn a lot of information about various locations along the line as you drive along from Transbay Terminal to Mallard Island. Additional scenarios were made by people in the community, and they're available to download from Steam Workshop. When I looked through the manual, I noticed a section with notes for scenario makers. It's essentially a list of details to make sure the operations are authentic for the route. Now, as much as I like this add-on overall, I realise that it's not perfect. For one thing, while the SN Interurban cars are labelled as including both motor and trailer variants, the trailer car model is a direct copy of the motor car, albeit with the pantograph, trolley pole, and cab controls stripped out. I've always been disappointed by this situation, and it doesn't help that these units still have an annoying glitch where some of the audio randomly cuts out for no reason. What's equally annoying is the fact that we haven't got any other Sacramento Northern passenger stock in the game, only the 1003 class. If my research is correct, the SN also operated 11 examples of the design known as the Bernie safety car. The design is known to me thanks to Invercargill tram number 15, a Bernie that's now preserved and regularly used on the tourist line in Christchurch, New Zealand, which opened in 1995. As for the Sacramento Northern variants, at least one of them is preserved and operational at the Western Railway Museum in Suisun City, California. The museum is also home to motorcar 1005, the only surviving example of the 1003 class. Thinking back to the 1003 class in TS Classic, I've noticed that the motor car still has a couple of issues that have never been fixed, besides the aforementioned audio glitches. For one thing, although the motor car appears to have a cab at both ends, and you can see that a little control stand has even been modelled in the smaller cab, you can only drive this thing from one end in-game. This is annoying when it comes to trying to operate the shuttle from West Pittsburgh to Pittsburgh, which typically only ran with one coach, and when you need to go the other way, you've got no choice but to throw the motor car in reverse, put your head out the window by pressing Shift 2, and observe the line from that one functioning cab. The 1003 class were equipped with trolley poles as well as a pantograph. The former were used on the street running section through Oakland, but they do not work on the in-game models. Instead, only the pantograph is functional. Another issue I found was in the cab view on the steeple cab locomotive, and it relates to the bell. Although you can press the left and right arrow keys to change cab camera positions, you'll still need to press Ctrl plus or Ctrl minus to properly change control stands. This means that, even though the bell is only placed at one end on the external model, you'll still see it in the cab view regardless of which stand you're driving from. Thinking back to the steeple cab's post-war livery, one thing that always bugged me was the orange stripes on each side, which don't line up with those on the front of the bonnet. The ferry slips on Mallard Island are a massive contrast from the urban environment in San Francisco, Emeryville, and Oakland, and once you've arrived, it feels like you're shunting the rolling stock on and off an actual ferry. However, the ferry model itself is not drivable. Instead, it's just a static prop that's incorporated into the jetty model. Despite the issues I have with the included motive power, I still think highly of G-Trax's Sacramento Northern South End add-on, and can confidently recommend it to other TS Classic players who like American routes. This one is especially interesting to see in TS since, as far as I know, it's the only interurban route in the game. And as for how I'd rate this route, I think it deserves an 8.5 out of 10.